to Safe Space. Woo!
Yeah!
Just chatting absolute shit. So today we are joined by our first guest. Alex, would you like to introduce who you are?
Yes. My name is Alex and I'm 18 and I live in West Sussex. And yeah, that's about
We've
me.
kind of dragged Alex on here at a bit of short notice, so this is a bit like all over the place. I do apologise, it was a bit of a whim. But we love Alex, and we wanted to chat to Alex because Alex has done a lot of very good work in her time as an adult. Not even as an adult.
Yeah, teenager.
Yeah, how old were you? What, 16, 17?
Yeah, I think it was summer of last year, so I would have been 16, turning 17.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's
long
so
time ago.
young. Like, when I was 16, 17, I definitely wasn't thinking about doing any good for the community at all. So, like, well done for that, I guess. So, yeah, we kind of wanted to have a bit of a chat about kind of what you were doing. Alex had a campaign which is still actually running.
Yeah, it's still up.
It's still going. I checked it earlier. There's like 8,000 and something signatures on it now, which is insane. I have a copy of the campaign here, which I will kind of try and summarise as best as I can. But basically, a group of teenagers who are asking our local council to provide better mental health support in crisis. Since the start of the year, at least 3 teenagers in the small town we live have taken their own lives and another passed away in a car accident. These 4 young people were our friends. Their deaths are shattering our community and we need support. We know that teachers don't receive adequate training to deal with these sorts of events or spot and act upon any signs of mental ill health. Mental health services are not able to cope with the situation. Our goal is to use this campaign as a voice for young people suffering from their mental health. One of us has personal experience with dealing with mental illness. Last year she was referred to an emotional support service and waited up to 6 months for an appointment. Once under the service, she felt like they couldn't wait to sign her off because of the pressure. She got no benefit from the treatment and it lasted a few weeks only. We all have personally dealt with friends who have very serious depression, and more on one occasion we have had to talk our friends out of suicide. In most of these cases, schools simply have no idea what was going on. These events predate the coronavirus. These problems in our community are nothing new. Since lockdown, one of our families had to accommodate teenage friends who have not been able to get support for mental health issues. These children ran away from home and our families took them in to give them some space to recover. One of our parents spoke to a social worker regarding the case who said that the service simply can't cope. Often we feel like we are having to act as therapists for our friends because they don't know who to turn to. It chips away at our own mental state. We are not qualified, we are children. People of all ages have been hit by the coronavirus pandemic, but we have been impacted at a crucial point. The institutions that are supposed to look after us are failing. We have so many ways of communicating with each other, but we feel powerless. We cannot express our opinions at elections and our voices simply aren't being heard. That's why we have signed this petition, asking our council to support our community with greater access to mental health services and a focus on working with schools to create safety nets for children in crisis.
Yeah, so it kind of all stemmed from hearing about a young person in our community who'd sadly taken their life, and I was talking to my parents about it and I was just thinking, this shouldn't be happening. Like, we are actual children, it's real world stuff, and I just thought enough is enough. Like, something's got to change, we can't keep having more deaths like this. And like, it's not just the death itself, everything that stems from around it as well, so how their friends and family will deal with it as well. And there was just no support for any of them, and yeah, I just decided, why not try something new?
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah.
It's like insane. So, obviously you launched this campaign, it went a bit crazy. I think it went a bit crazier than maybe you thought.
Oh, definitely. It kind of went overnight and it was like 100,000 shares or something. And I was like, oh, what the hell? I need to start
doing it.
Yeah,
no, I get that. I think when you kind of launch a campaign like this, I think because it affects so many people, like, it's not just the kids, it's the parents, it's the teachers, it's like everyone. I think obviously it goes a bit like mental, and I think especially like where we are, there's not a lot of people doing anything, so I think for like someone especially like 16, 17 to come out and be like something needs to change, that's like for the community like unheard of, really.
Properly.
So I mean, you've spoken a little bit about what kind of influenced you to do this and stuff. What kind of outcome did you get because I know you were trying to reach out to councils and stuff, so where did you kind of get with that?
Yeah, so our local MP actually sent me a letter through the post a few days afterwards, and we arranged a meeting with him, and me and a few of my friends. Were you there?
Yeah.
Alysha was there, and we sat down in our college and we kind of expressed our concerns and what we would like to change and what we'd expect from him as our MP. And it was a very interesting meeting. He kind of definitely took on board everything we were trying to get out of it, and said that he'd arranged some other meetings with the schools in the area as well as the council. So because of that, he created a hub in our area for teenagers to go if they're feeling alone or if they need extra help. I'm not actually sure how far he's gone with that because it would take quite a lot of time, but I know something along those lines is currently in the works.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? I feel like in like the day and age we're in at the moment, and I think with the government we have, it's very difficult to kind of get what you're trying to say to actually get actioned. And I think part of that is down to the fact that we're in such a small area. This is quite a big country. Like, obviously, for someone from a small area to go to them and be like, look, like, this is like what needs to happen. Like, it does get a lot harder, I think, for them to kind of not even just action it, but I think a lot of them don't know what to do. Because I think, especially during the pandemic, it was such an unprecedented time. I don't think anyone realised the kind of effect. I mean, we touched on it briefly last time, didn't we, about how you were at school and you would have been as well, like, during, and how that kind of, like, because obviously I don't know where I was working, I think, and like, so like for me, obviously, like for everyone it was a difficult time, but I think, as you said, like, it was such a pivotal point in your development as a person, like both of you. I feel like it kind of, it would have had some form of effect on that. And like, I know you spoke, didn't you, about how like you were at school and then like you like didn't go to your last day and it was all like really sad. Like, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, I actually got COVID the week before. We broke up and I was in quarantine and I was seeing all of my friends in their last day and I felt really left out.
I watched it on the Instagram with my mum.
Yeah, but I think it was kind of, I know with you it was definitely waves of, yay, no school, oh no, no school.
Yeah.
We were actually talking about this the other night, weren't we?
And it's just, it was a very, very big and very drastic change, and I think it definitely affected everyone, whether that was positive or negative as well. But
yeah, I think it just had such a knock-on effect on like so many groups of people, and it was that thing of like no one knew what to do because no one had ever thought this was going to happen. But then they started to kind of figure out, I mean, I don't know to what extent, but I think there was kind of a lot of, okay, yeah, no, kids are like suffering, but then it was a lot of, oh, kids are suffering, well, we've already got the service in place, what else can we do? I don't think there was a lot of kind of, hang on, this is like big. And I think, like, I know that obviously you spoke about in your campaign about how the services were so like overcrowded. Like, I mean, I guess I was in the adult service at the time, I wasn't in CAM, so I don't know the kind of dynamic that it was there, but I can imagine it was probably like pretty horrific. And I mean, you said about like a 6-month waiting time as well.
Yeah, that was awful. I remember I sort of tried to apply for therapy through CAMS just before lockdown, and it was February of 2021 when they finally got back to me and they said, oh yeah, we can arrange a once a week phone call for 4 weeks, and then, but that's all we can do, otherwise you'd have to pay loads of money for private therapy. And I said, that's nothing.
No, literally. 4 weeks, I mean, you can't even do anything.
And it was on the phone, like, it wasn't even a live stream.
You have no chance to like even get to know like a face. I mean, I struggled with that, to be fair, like, because my nurse got changed just before COVID, and then during lockdown I didn't meet him until like a year and a bit later. Like, this person was like controlling my every move and I didn't even know what he looked like. And then the first time I met him was when I went inpatient, and I was like, this is like not an experience I wanted to have with you. Like, hi, nice to meet you, like, I'm off, see you later. Like, it just wasn't what anyone wanted. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I know there was a lot of kind of, okay, the NHS is struggling, we all get that, but then there's also that frustration that comes a bit of like, okay, they're struggling, but that's not anyone's fault.
No.
Like, that's not our fault. I mean, yeah, you could argue that they're not funded enough because they're not, and then there's someone to blame for that, but you know, it's not the service's fault, and I feel like it's so hard not to take out on them.
Yeah.
Like, I know I found it really difficult to not get like super angry at them and be like, why aren't you doing anything?
And they're trying just as hard to keep everything going.
Yeah.
But my one of our close friends actually passed away in a car crash during the time I was receiving these 4 weeks of therapy, and I cried to her down the phone, and she didn't really know what to say. I'm like, that's your job. Your job is to kind of.
I feel like grief is something that they really need a bit more help on the old side, because I mean, yeah, they'll often try and like refer you elsewhere, or they'll be like, oh, go and do this, go and do that. I mean, I know, like, I don't know kind of what support you got, and we can touch on that in a minute, but I know when I went through bereavement, I was told that I couldn't access support until it had been 6 months, because that was like how long it took the brain to like do its normal grieving process, and I was like, that doesn't mean that it makes it any easier. Like, that just means it's the hardest 6 months. You're then not getting anything.
Well.
Yeah. So like, do you feel like, obviously you spoke about like the loss of your friends and stuff, and obviously that at any age is difficult, but especially like as a teenager it's awful. Did you feel like there was any support?
There was a little bit of support through my college. We had a meeting with the head teacher, and he was very nice about it. And he just said there's support groups at lunchtime if you want to go. But apart from that, there wasn't really anything. I mean, for her close friends, there was a lot more, but for the people who knew her or have known her for a while but aren't like really good friends, they were kind of just left to your own devices, really, and that was quite hard.
Yeah.
Because it's like you weren't appreciated as someone.
Yeah, I think it's hard, isn't it? Like, I think grief is like, it's a whole process, and I think obviously it is hard for the families and the close friends and everything, but it's hard for like everyone. I think even like, especially I remember like when the young girls that passed away did, I remember like it shook everyone. Yeah. Like, there was a massive shake up in the community as a whole, like even people that didn't know them. Like, I remember like literally people like lining the streets to like pay their respects and stuff, and like I think that for me was like a very big moment of being like, hang on a minute, like this isn't, because I mean, I know when I was, obviously I'm 3 years older than you guys, which doesn't sound like a lot, but so much can change in 3 years, and I think I know what it was like when I was that age of like, there wasn't much support, and I think like you always kind of hope things are going to change, and then when things like that happen, you're kind of like, nothing's changed. I mean, I think we spoke briefly about involvement with like mental health services and stuff, didn't we, and about how, you know, we've all kind of shared that experience of the whole like, it's a bit of a waiting game, and then like you don't know how long you're going to have to wait for, and you don't know like it's just so like, you get left in limbo. I know like you feel that a lot, don't you? Okay.
I first got put on the CAMHS waiting list when I was 12, because I went to the GP like several times from when I was like 11, because my parents found out I was self-harming. They didn't really know what was going on, they didn't know how to help. They took me to my GP. I then got referred to CAMHS, and that was when I was 12. I'm now 18, and I've been on and off the waiting lists for the entire 6 years. And all I've ever actually gotten from CAMHS was last year in about, it was May, so I was 17, I got a phone call, and the lady spoke to me for like half an hour, and then she was like, I'm going to have to call your mum and let her know the stuff you've told me, after I asked them not to. I didn't tell them anything that would like suggest I was in danger to myself or to others. I had just told them about previous things that have happened. She then called my mum and told her everything, which then caused problems with me and my parents, because they didn't know, they don't understand that sort of stuff. And then didn't hear from her. Nothing at all.
They like to just put a spanner in the works, don't they?
And then this year,
yeah, it was just before your 18th birthday.
I went in, had my assessment done, and
which you pushed for.
I had to fight to even get that assessment.
Yeah.
Like, I had to proper fight for that. Had my assessment, and obviously I was a month away from turning 18, so it was like a bit tricky anyways. And what the person that assessed me basically said to me, she was like, we'll just take this assessment, and then as soon as you turn 18, we'll refer you to adult. And then from that, we can work on getting a diagnosis, therapy, whatever's needed. Turns out I wasn't referred to adult, so I was actually discharged from CAMS. And just, like, discharged from everything completely.
Left, yeah.
So I was just kind of there, like, you can clearly tell I'm struggling. Like, I've made it apparent, like I've told you guys. Crisis team, they came out about 4 or 5 times, and then the lady that was there on the last visit basically said to me, from what we can tell, what you're experiencing and what you're feeling isn't any different to any other 18-year-old. Something about just hanging in there and getting through it. She says some really cringy little quotes,
yeah,
like,
they always do.
the sun comes
The crisis
out.
team are known for it. They're like, take a bath and you'll be fine, yeah.
But it was really weird because one of the crisis people that came out to see me, he was like, next time we come out, I'll bring medication.
I remember
with us.
that, yeah.
They were
I
like,
remember
something
that.
about something for the anxiety. I don't know.
They were going to bring you benzos.
Yeah, which was weird.
Yeah, I remember them literally, because you messaged me and you were like, they're giving me this, and I was like, you what? Like,
Yeah,
what
like,
do
I
you
was
mean? Like, this is a
baffled.
bit strong. Like, I'd been given this, like, injected in hospital. Like, I was like, this is a bit, like... And they were, like, they were proper adamant on it, and then they just...
Then nothing more.
They never came.
No. It was taking more of a toll on my mental health trying to get help than not getting help. So
I
now
think,
it's just...
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so difficult for people to reach out in the first place, is you get doors slammed in your face time and time again, and I think with CAMS it's such a fine line. Like, they say that everything's confidential, but obviously they have to abide by safeguarding laws, which is ultimately only if you're actually at risk they have to do something.
So I told them about, like, an attempt.
Yeah.
And they were like, do your parents know about this? And I was like, no, and I explained why. I literally was like to them, yeah, no, they're not the most, like, when they found out I self-harmed, they make fun of it, and they punish me for it.
Yeah.
Like, they take my phone away.
It almost puts you more at risk,
That's
them
the
knowing.
thing.
Yeah.
And I explained that to them, and they just... And then literally a month later I was kicked out. Like, I'm not saying that is because of that, but, like,
part of
it contributed to the breakdown of the relationship.
I feel like, I think a lot of young people don't reach out for support because they're scared of people finding out. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but that was definitely a concern for me. Was like, I didn't want my parents knowing, and you know, and I mean, I had such a weird experience of, like, I've been in the system since I was 11, nearly 12, but then you got to think that's 10 years ago, and the waiting lists were nowhere near like they are now. I mean, I got, for CAMS, when I first went, I was in and assessed and diagnosed in a month. It was very much just you're really depressed, we're going to give you really strong antidepressants and then send you on your way. And I mean, like, again, we spoke about it last week about how, like, the antidepressants I was on didn't work and they made me so ill, and, like, I feel like even from that point you're just like, what am I doing? Like, what? And I think the one thing about CAMS as well that, like, people don't realise is that your parents are normally with you in the appointments, and I don't see the point at all.
You're not gonna
I
really
get it
speak
for, like,
to
5-year-olds. I mean, CAMS, obviously they take you from, I think it's 5 to, like, 18, so for, like, 5-year-olds I can kind of understand it, but for, like, 16-year-olds, I mean, at the time I remember, like, I went through a period of, I, like, moved to my mum's and my dad's a lot, and I used to be like, there's stuff I don't want to talk about with my dad here. Like, there's, like, stuff that I'm, like, not happy doing. And, like, even with my mum, I was like, there's stuff that I definitely don't want to talk about, like, with my mum here. And that's no, like, disrespect to them. It's just, I think you naturally don't. Like, I think there's a lot of things. I think it's really hard to, like, be like, yeah, I'm really struggling in front of your parents. Let alone when they're not, like you say, like, the most accepting, kind of understanding. And again, I think a lot of that generation is kind of like that, though.
I think it puts a lot of pressure on, like, families in general, because it's kind of, knock-on effect. So if a child has poor mental health, and then that'll make the parents stress out because they don't know what to do, they don't know who to reach out to for help, and the child is also like, well, I look up to you to help me, but there's nothing that they can do.
I mean, I'm sure they, like, won't mind me saying it, but I know my parents were like, they found it really hard because it's that thing of, like, well, what have we done wrong? You know, you're at school and you're doing quite well, what? And that's nothing against them, that's just, I think, as a parent, how you work. And I think parents go one of two ways. So either very in denial, and it's very like, no, you're fine, don't want to talk about it, or it's you do get families that are very supportive.
Yeah, my parents have been really, really great for everything. They've always stuck by my side, and my parents helped me with my campaign, and yeah, they've been kind of my wingmen.
Yeah.
But like, as you're saying, when I was going through, they just didn't know what to do. That they were there, obviously, as support, but there's only so much that they can do.
There's only so much people can do. I mean, I think as a parent, I mean, like you say, like the whole thing about like we're not qualified, like we are just people. Yeah. And I mean, like I always say the same to people that like come to me. I'm like, I'm not a professional. I just know what I've been through.
I can give you advice.
Yeah, like I can advise with you, but I can't do anything really. And I feel like, yeah, sometimes people do just need a bit of like advice, but they're like 9 times out of 10, if it's complicated, people need like intervention and like support. And I feel like as a parent, I think it's very difficult to obviously separate yourself from what's going on, and I think parents find it very hard to like acknowledge if maybe they've had a part in it or like any of that. It becomes a whole different conversation. And I think, you know, obviously looking at statistics, like people are dying every day, multiple times a day, and I think a lot of it comes down to like lack of intervention because people don't know the signs.
No, my mum's she's a primary school teacher, and she's had to deal with a lot of quite challenging kids, and she has had no training whatsoever. Luckily she's quite a good sort of, she can see when something's not quite right, and she will pitch it to the head teacher, and they're like, no, nothing's the matter. And then the kid attempted on a school trip, and she was like, why hasn't anything been done
that's
sooner?
Like primary school age, like that's young.
Year 6.
That's young, and I feel like it's only getting younger.
Oh, it is.
Like I feel like, I mean, I think obviously it varies from person to person. I know that I kind of started displaying symptoms from a very young age, but that's because obviously it went on to become more complex. Whereas, you know, in year 6, I don't think I was thinking about like suicide. It's definitely getting worse.
Life was so much simpler, but I also think, I hate to be one of those people, but I definitely think social media has played a big part. Because kids don't know about these things unless they're on the internet.
That's the thing.
I mean,
like I didn't know what that stuff was at that age because
it wasn't around.
God, like I didn't know what was going on. I was just like just around my Barbies.
Yeah,
like, she didn't care. But like even like I see now like the kids like primary school children, and I'm like, what is going on? Like I remember like there was a situation like that happened a few weeks ago now that like isn't something that like I've ever really spoken about, because obviously it was like business and stuff, so I have to be like careful with like confidentiality. But there was a situation that arose between, there was a very young child needing a lot of support. As a business, we can't do that. We can refer and we can signpost, but ultimately a concern comes up about a child, the first thing you're meant to do is ring social services, even if it's not the parent's fault, you know. And that again puts a lot of parents off getting support for their kids.
They don't want their kids to be taken.
And that's such a fear in so many people, because ultimately, like, social services, I think you hear social services and you think like kids in care.
It's such like, I don't know the word.
There's a lot of stigma
around social services, like, because their main goal isn't to take children away. It's to protect
keep them in their families ultimately, as long as it's safe to do so.
Yeah, and I think taking them away is like their last resort.
Oh no. Like, the amount of times my social worker made me go back home and told me to go back home and just stick it out and try it out.
Oh yeah, they like don't like doing it at all.
Yeah, like
that's like
she was very reluctant to even get me into the Y Centre.
Yeah, no, I know.
Because she was like, you need to be at home. Like that's where your parents are. That's where your siblings are. I'm like, okay, but it's not the best place for me.
I feel like as a teenager, I think that gets worse. I think when you're like a young child, they're a lot more hot on like safeguarding concerns, welfare checks, like all of that. I feel like the older you get, the more they're just like,
take care.
You're technically an adult now. Off your trot. See you later. Like
their thing was, I was so close to 18.
That was my problem. They wouldn't even. I wasn't even assigned a social worker because I was, and that was. I mean, again, I guess in a way that's kind of a way it's got slightly better. Is I was like 3 months off 18, and they wouldn't even assign me a social worker then. Whereas now I feel like they do assign you someone a lot earlier, but that they still don't really do much. Let's talk about Shout. Talk to me.
Shout. Where do I even begin? I've used this service maybe about 4 times, not recently, during lockdown. I was having a very, very bad night last year, and I said help at about 11 o'clock in the evening, and I did not get a response until about 6 a.m. the next morning. And obviously I wasn't in a great spot, but if I would have been much worse, that probably wouldn't have ended well. And I didn't know who to talk to because all of my friends were asleep. Didn't want to bother my parents with anything, so I thought, okay, let me try this out. And yeah, I didn't get a response for 5 hours, and in that time I'd managed to calm myself down because I had my cat with me. And they messaged me back at 6 saying, oh, hello, sorry for the wait, how can we help? And I said, well, you're a bit late now. Yeah, and it made me really angry because obviously it's not their fault because they are so backed up, but there wasn't even like a follow-up text saying, if you need immediate help, call Samaritans, call 999, blah, blah. Like, it was literally, we're waiting for an agent, please wait.
I feel like, I mean, I know, like, when Shout first, like, kind of came out, it wasn't a thing that people were really using. I mean, it's been a thing for quite a while, but I think recently it's become a lot more common, and I know there's posters up in schools and all sorts now, which is good, but they're not immediate help.
Yeah.
They're good if you just need a chat, if you need to vent, if you just need to, but I mean, I've always found, like, the problem is, I think you reach out at a point where you're kind of like, okay, I know I need to reach out, I'm going to reach out. And then like you say, it goes one of two ways. Either it gets 10 times worse, or you calm yourself down, and then there was no point going to them in the first place. And that's not me telling people not to, that's just me saying, I think there's not a lot of, as you say, if you need immediate support, do this, do that. Ring Samaritans, 999, they're 24/7, they'll be there, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, Shout is like, I think because it's so much more, when it first became a thing, it worked very well because not many people knew about it, so not many people were using it, and obviously it's good for people that like struggle with phone calls and all of that kind of stuff. And then I think as time went on, I mean, it's the same with anything, isn't it? Like, things get more and more busy, and they still don't have the staff to deal with how busy it gets, so they just kind of, I think they're probably still working the same staff numbers they were like 3 years ago.
Definitely.
Just with like 3 times the amount of people coming to them every minute. But the mental health charities aren't getting the funding from the government that they then need to do what they're doing.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a lot now of like non-profit organisations that kind of work on a basis. I mean, I know of quite a few that kind of money they earn goes back into the business. It's essentially what we do, but we donate ours. It doesn't kind of go back in, we just donate it. But my concern is suicide prevention. I don't feel like they do that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where Samaritans come in, and that's why, like, I mean, I will like sit for hours and talk about how much I love Samaritans, and like
we
big up Nora, because like Nora's my fundraising campaigner and she's absolutely brilliant.
Legend. Shout out to
and I love her, and she emails me like every week. They're very, one thing I noticed with Samaritans, they are very good at kind of being in touch with their volunteers, being in touch with the people that support them, and they want everyone to be involved, and they run campaigns themselves, I know, quite frequently.
Yeah.
They also now offer training. That's like a new thing. They now do first aid training for mental health, and they do suicide prevention.
Yeah, that's a thing in schools. They have to have one person who's been trained now.
That's good. I mean, they've got branches everywhere now.
Yeah.
They are on a lot of a bigger scale than Shout are, and they're equipped to deal with it because they've got a branch.
They've got quite clever sort of, not advertising, but like they've got their posters which are simple, but they've got a really strong message on them. A bit like yours.
I feel like with Samaritans, they are very good at knowing their audience.
Oh yeah.
They
100%.
know that a lot of the people, I mean, ultimately Samaritans is for everyone. Every age, every gender, sexuality, nationality, anything. But they deal with a lot of young people. Like, I think their main audience is like 16 to 25, kind of similar to ours. And I feel like, I mean, that was one of the reasons I think I chose to work with them. It didn't make sense for me to work with a charity that was catered towards anyone that I wasn't.
One particular.
Yeah. And I think 16 to 25, I mean, we had a conversation, didn't we, about like school ages and stuff. I mean, it's quite a broad. I mean, you think about when you're 16 compared to when you're 25, that's quite a big group of people. Yeah, I think the charities that kind of advertise, I mean, Samaritans you see a lot on bridges and train stations, like they have posters everywhere. That is what more people need to do, because that is your target audience.
Yeah.
Essentially, is you know, it's hard to talk about, and it's not a conversation people like want to have, which is why we're having it, essentially, because no one else is. I feel like we, as young people, you know, everyone knows someone who has dealt with either thoughts of suicide or suicide attempts, or has sadly succeeded, because that happens, and it's, you know, unfortunately it's not uncommon. If you're looking for an audience where that's what people are feeling, then where are you going to put your advertisement? In the places they're going to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is where they've really succeeded.
Yeah, I don't really have much experience with Samaritans, because luckily I've never fully got to that sort of stage where I need immediate help. But from what I've heard from people who have used them, they're really good, and they listen, and they actually give useful advice and things.
I remember once I literally called, I was on the phone to them for like 3 hours. This woman was just like talking to me for like 3 hours, and she literally, like, that day saved my life. Like, just from that alone, because like she was literally just like chatting. It was like I was on the phone to like my auntie. She literally was just like talking, and it was like it brings you back down to earth. It makes you feel like a human being, because I think when you feel like that, you don't feel like you're really connected to anyone or anything. I feel like the Samaritans just do so much.
Sometimes all you need is a good chat that makes you feel more normal, and makes you feel like your feelings are more valid than if you're in a sort of state and like no one else feels like this. Like speaking to someone who's sort of spoken to all sorts of people would like it makes you feel.
Yeah, and I know that like we, like as a business, are such advocates of that. Like sometimes people just need to talk. It's not always about, like, people don't always want solutions. I know there's times where I don't want someone to tell me what to do. I just want to feel it for a bit. And like we spoke last week about how important it is to like feel your emotions, feel your shit, like, you know. And I feel like there's not enough of that happening. And I know, like, as you said about, especially with like the bereavement and stuff, it was good that there were support groups, but not everyone can work in a group. That is where, especially with like grief and bereavement, I think there's a massive gap in like one-to-one. And I think as well, talking to people that have been through it is like one of the most helpful things. And I think there's a massive gap in that. I have a therapist who I work with every week, have done for like nearly 2 years now. She's absolutely brilliant, and I can tell she cares, and it's experience, and she wants to help. I feel like everyone needs a therapist at some point, even if you're like 30 and don't know what you want to do about your marriage. Like it is normal to be scared. I think everyone is. That first step is like,
it's very scary,
the absolute worst. It's like the scariest thing. And then I feel like every time you do it, it's still as scary. It's kind of like they try and use a one shoe fits all thing, and that isn't how mental health works. Everyone is
very
different.
much the complete opposite.
Even if you have like the same diagnosis,
have the same condition, and your brain's just still different.
It shows up differently in people.
I mean, we were like looking at statistics the other day, and like I think it was like 72% of parents feel like their children have got worse while on waiting lists, which makes sense, because I think now the waiting list is like 18 months for CAMS at the moment.
So I'm like kind of convinced if like 12-year-old me got the help that I needed there and then, I'd be like somewhat more.
100%.
Like it wouldn't be as bad as it is now.
What do you think kids need?
They need to know it's valid to feel what they're feeling, because I don't know about everyone, but like in my case, especially when I was like younger, I would like, I'm not very good at explaining my feelings anyway. I never have been. I would try and explain whatever I'm feeling to my parents, and it would just be, you're so young, you've got nothing to feel this way about. Or they're just like, okay, it's just this, you'll feel fine after this. And like, I never was allowed to like feel that they were okay, if that makes sense. Like, they were always invalidated. And
one thing that I've definitely noticed is that mental health, it just isn't talked about enough. And I think if it's something that is openly spoken about when you're younger, it's easier to understand because you've kind of grown up with it. And I think being able to sort of understand how you're feeling, it kind of all kind of connects with it. But definitely it should be not even taught in schools. It should just be made known that it's okay to feel this way.
You know, like how they have like sex ed in like PD.
Yeah.
Like there should be just something.
It should at least be incorporated. It's become a very well-known concept now that it's not just depression, it's not just anxiety. There is so much, and it's, you know, you can have both or you can have neither and still not be okay. Like, I think people hear suicide and they're like, depressed.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I don't know how many people are listening on this that might experience it, but along with my BPD, I also get manic episodes, which is like the worst. They coexist. I mean, everyone with BPD to an extent gets mania, but it's called like euphoria, I think, is like the technical term. Full-blown mania is like kind of one step further, and most of my suicide attempts have been then. I haven't always been depressed, and it's rare that I have been. And I always say to people, like, if I'm depressed, just like, give me the support, but you kind of have to feel it.
No, I've kind of come to realise not anymore because I'm like 6 weeks clean. Can we just appreciate that? Go me. But like the beginning of this year, from about like January to like April, I'd be really like sad, I'd be really depressed, and then boom, out of it, and I'd be feeling the best I've ever felt, you know. I would like deep clean my flat.
That like euphoria,
after like just letting it become a pit.
It's
but
absolutely insane.
The self-harm, like, it was just kind of, it was during both, but it would definitely be worse when I was feeling wow, life is amazing, everything is so cool, I need to do everything, my mind's going like 100 miles
it's
an hour.
because you feel so like out of control, and you feel like you need to kind of bring yourself back to your body, and I think a lot of people do that by like self-harm.
Yeah, that's always,
you know,
being...
And this is the other thing, I mean, self-harm is such a broad, it's not just, I mean, when I was like, I remember thinking self-harm was just people slitting their wrists all the time, and it's not. It's
many
like
different types.
Some people drink too much, some people do drugs, some people don't eat, some people eat too much, some people do cut themselves. It's so important that people do like what you did with your campaign, and I think I kind of speak for anyone that kind of, I mean, it reached a lot of people.
Yeah,
it went crazy. Like, I remember, I mean, I didn't even know you. I didn't know either of you at that point.
It definitely felt like it brought the community a little bit closer. Like, everyone was kind of going through the same worrying, this could be my child, this could be my family. And then, people just started talking about it, and it became a much more spoken about thing.
People suddenly wanted to talk, and I think that was a moment that a lot of people have been waiting for. Yeah, it definitely did something for the community and for everyone, and, you know, I just hope that, as you say, like, the MP keeps his promises. It's just a message for everyone that I kind of wanted to get across by having you on, is kind of like, this is happening, this is real, and it's not going anywhere.
It is now.
It is now. Now is a very... There's no better time than now.
Exactly. No better time than the present.
Now.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Be the person you wanted when you were younger. That's like my favourite thing. I literally swear by that. I love that. And I feel like the people that have a voice are trying. Yeah. Like, we are... Like,
we're having a go.
As people and as like a business and as like a community, like, there are people trying to fight your corner, but we can't fight your corner until we know where the issues are. So, like, if you've got anything that you want to say, drop us an email. I'll write it here. If you're on Spotify, it's support@mind-movement.co.uk.
Smashed it.
So if you've got anything you want to tell us, no matter how old you are, where you're from, let us know, because I'm really eager to start a bit more of a conversation around this. I'm feeling very inspired at the moment, I think, to kind of do something.
And buy merch!
And buy my merch!
Make peace with yourself.
Alright,
perspective
going on.
Self-love ain't selfish, and it's not. Love yourself.
So, thank you everyone.
Thank you for joining
us. If you want to find more, you can follow us on Instagram @MindMovementBrand. The TikTok is @MindMovementLTD. The website is www.mind-movement.co.uk. Obviously you can find us on Spotify if you're listening. I'm assuming that's where you are. You can also find us on YouTube. Just type in Mind Movement LTD and it should come up. If you want to find Alex, what is your...
Alex Wilkie04 is my Instagram and my TikTok.
But yeah, obviously mine and Alysha's socials will be linked, as they always are. And we are sending you all lots of love and support your way.
Look
and
after yourself.
Love yourself, look after yourselves, and we will see you next week.
You are loved, you are worthy, and you are capable.